I'm Tanya. The boardroom was deathly silent as I watched Daniel stand up for himself, his voice steady and firm. The tension in the air was palpable, like a storm about to break. Patrick, his face pale and his charm finally cracking, stared at Daniel in disbelief. "Daniel, you're making a huge mistake," Patrick hissed, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and fear. "The board trusts me. The investors trust me. You're just a fool who's been led astray by this woman." Daniel didn't flinch. He took a slow step forward, his cane striking the floor with a deliberate rhythm. "I have my own voice back, Patrick. And trust me, people will listen." I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a moment I'd been waiting for, a moment when Daniel finally stood up against the man who had tried to steal his company and his future. As I watched the scene unfold, my mind drifted back to the beginning, to the day my world fell apart. I was a nurse at St. Luke's Hospital, working the morning shift. The snow was falling outside, blanketing the city in a peaceful hush. But inside, I was anything but peaceful. I'd just received a text from Jake, my fiancé. "Can we meet? Same place, 11 a.m. The message was cold, devoid of the warmth and affection I was used to. I stared at it for a moment, my chest tightening. Something was wrong. I quickly typed back, "On my way," and headed to the downtown cafe. By the time I arrived, the snow had thickened, swirling around the glass facade like smoke. The place smelled of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon, but I couldn't find any comfort in it. I spotted Jake immediately, sitting by the window. His blazer was neatly folded over the chair, and his phone was face down on the table. He didn't smile when he saw me. "You look like someone who's about to give bad news," I said, trying to keep it light. Jake didn't answer right away. He stirred his coffee, the metal spoon clinking against the porcelain. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "about us." My heart sank. Those words had ended more relationships than I could count. "Okay," I said quietly. He exhaled, looking anywhere but at me. "I don't think we should get married." It felt like a physical blow. The hum of the espresso machines and the muffled chatter in the cafe blurred into white noise. "What?" I managed to say. Jake leaned back, as if distance could soften the impact. "It's not working. You're great, Tanya. You really are. But I've changed. Things have changed." I stared at him, disbelief tightening my throat. "Changed?" "We set a date. We signed the lease." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "But there's someone else." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Who?" He hesitated for only a second. "Luna Thompson. She's the daughter of Henry Thompson, an investor in my father's company." It was like the air had been punched out of my lungs. I whispered, "Your father's investor?" Jake didn't deny it. He simply looked at me, cold and measured. "It's complicated, but she and it just makes sense. Her family has been good to us, to me." I laughed, a sound sharp enough to make the couple at the next table glance over. "Good to you," I repeated. "That's what this is about, isn't it? You want a shortcut?" He didn't argue. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the small velvet box I'd returned to him after the fitting. Inside, the engagement ring caught the light, a pale diamond surrounded by frost. "I think it's best if you take this back," he said flatly. I pushed the box toward him. "Keep it. You'll need it soon enough." For a second, something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. He stood up, adjusted his tie, and without another word, left me sitting there with my untouched coffee and the echo of a life that had just collapsed. The snow hit harder when I stepped outside. The city looked blurred, almost dreamlike. I walked aimlessly, my breath coming out in uneven clouds. I had no destination in mind, just the need to move, to feel something other than the hollow ringing in my chest. By the time I reached my mother's house, my fingers were numb. My mother, Lily, opened the door before I even knocked. Her gray hair was tied back, and her eyes were tired but kind. "Sweetheart," she said softly, taking my coat. "What happened?" I tried to answer, but my voice cracked. "He's gone." My mother didn't ask more. She just pulled me into her arms, holding me tightly like she had when I was a child scared of thunderstorms. Then let him go, she whispered. You don't chase people who can't see your worth. We stood there for a long time, the only sound the ticking of the old kitchen clock. Later that night, after my mother went to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. The house creaked with the winter wind. On the table lay my engagement planner, a pastel notebook filled with dreams that were now meaningless. I turned off the lamp, leaving the room bathed in the dim light of the street outside. Snowflakes brushed against the window pane like ghosts of something gentle and fleeting. My reflection looked back at me, pale, tired, unrecognizable. For the first time, I didn't fight the tears. I let them fall, silent and unrestrained. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, stirring a cup of coffee I hadn't tasted. My mother sat across from me, studying my pale face. Tanya, she said finally, her voice gentle but firm. Don't lose your faith in goodness. Not everyone disappoints you the way he did. I nodded without looking up. The words were meant to heal, but they landed like a bandage over a wound that was still bleeding. I'm not sure I have much faith left, Mom, I said. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then borrow mine for a while. The warmth in that simple phrase stayed with me long after I left the kitchen. I spent the rest of the morning half-heartedly scrolling through job listings, pretending to care. I wasn't ready to return to the hospital yet, not to the same halls where Jake used to wait for me after shifts, not to the same cafeteria where he'd once promised forever. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was my friend Mia. Hey, T. Still looking for work? I might have something. Private care. Good pay. I frowned and called her back immediately. Mia's cheerful voice filled the line. There's this man, wealthy, in his early 30s. He had an accident a year ago. Lives out by Lake Arrowhead. He's looking for a live-in nurse. Mostly mobility assistance, meds, basic PT routines. You'd have your own room, meals covered, and the salary, well, let's just say you could pay off your car in 3 months. That was enough to make me sit up straight. What's the catch? No catch, Mia said. But he's difficult. He's fired 5 nurses already. The housekeeper is the gatekeeper. You'll have to impress her first. Her name's Mrs. Evelyn Reed. I told her about you. I hesitated. Mia, I don't know. I'm not exactly in the best shape to deal with difficult people right now. That's exactly why you should do it, Mia countered. You need a change of scenery, T. Let someone else's problems drown out yours for a while. 2 hours later, I found myself in front of a sprawling estate hidden behind iron gates. The sign at the entrance read Blackwood Estate. The letters were carved elegantly into darkwood. The long driveway wound through a forest of snow-laden pines before opening onto a modern glass and stone mansion overlooking the frozen lake. I stepped out of the ride, my heart thumping. The cold bit at my cheeks as I walked toward the massive front door. Before I could knock, it opened. A tall, silver-haired woman in a gray wool suit stood there, her posture impeccable. Her expression was polite, but unreadable. You must be Miss Tanya, she said, her voice clipped and precise. I'm Mrs. Reed. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for seeing me, I said. Mrs. Reed led me inside. The entryway gleamed with polished marble floors and minimalist decor. Mr. Blackwood values order and discretion, she explained. You'll find both essential if you wish to work here. We stopped at a small sitting area by the window. Mrs. Reed gestured for me to sit, then opened a leather folder. You come highly recommended by MS.
Mia.
Your credentials check out. Before we proceed, this is a confidentiality agreement. She slid the document across the table. I read quickly. No photographs, no outside contact without approval, no discussions about the patient's health or personal life. It was stricter than any hospital policy I'd known. I understand, I said, signing my name. Mrs. Reed nodded approvingly. You'd be responsible for medication schedules, meal coordination, and assisting with therapy. 2 days off per month. Starting salary $100,000 a year plus benefits. I blinked. That was triple what I made at the hospital.
Mr.
Blackwood can afford to be generous, Mrs. Reed said. He demands professionalism and privacy in return. Does that frighten you? Honestly, I met her gaze. No, I think I could use a challenge. For the first time, the woman's lips curved into something almost resembling a smile. Then you'll report tomorrow at noon. Bring your essentials. Everything else will be provided. As I signed the final form, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't happiness exactly, more like quiet surrender to whatever fate had planned next. When I stepped back outside, snow had begun falling again, soft and slow. A black SUV idled by the gate, waiting to take me home. The next day, the SUV rolled through the long stretch of pine forest before the road opened to reveal Blackwood Estate in full view. The house looked like something drawn from another world, steel, glass, and stone layered into sharp, elegant lines. It stood at the edge of Lake Arrowhead, where the water had frozen solid, the surface glistening white under the midday sun. Mrs. Reed met me at the door. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you, she said, then paused briefly, lowering her voice. You'll find he values punctuality. The warmth inside the house was almost suffocating after the cold outside. Every surface gleamed, every object in its exact place, like a museum no one dared to touch. The air carried faint notes of antiseptic and cedarwood. Where should I put my things? I asked softly. Upstairs, second door on the left. But first, Mr. Blackwood would like to see you, Mrs. Reed replied. I followed her through a long hallway lined with abstract paintings, dark colors, heavy brush strokes. We stopped an open doorway. Inside, sunlight filtered through tall windows, falling across the sleek frame of a wheelchair turned toward the view of the lake. Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Reed announced. This is Miss Tanya, your new live-in nurse. The man in the chair didn't turn immediately. When he did, my breath caught for a moment. Alexander Blackwood was younger than I'd imagined, in his early 30s, handsome in a sharp, almost severe way. His jaw was clean, shaven, his dark hair slightly overgrown, his eyes an icy gray that seemed to weigh everything they looked at. Number 6, he said, his voice low, steady, but unmistakably detached. I frowned, unsure I'd heard correctly. I'm sorry. You're the 6th nurse in 10 months, he said flatly. I like to keep count. It helps me manage expectations. Mrs. Reed gave a subtle shake of her head. Don't argue. But I only smiled faintly. Then I'll try not to make it to 7. Something flickered in his expression. Annoyance, maybe amusement, but it was gone too quickly to tell. He gestured toward the files on the table beside him. Medication logs, therapy notes, dietary restrictions. Read them. Memorize them. And please, spare me the sympathy speeches. I've heard them all. I wasn't planning to give one. I replied evenly. That earned me a long, assessing glance. He seemed ready to challenge me, but Mrs. Reed cut in smoothly. Mr. Blackwood, it's almost time for your meal. Shall I have it brought here? No, he said, turning back toward the window in the dining room. Let's make our guests feel part of the household routine. The dining room was vast, its walls of glass, looking out over the frozen lake. The table could have seated 10, but only 3 places were set. Mrs. Reed sat at one end, Alexander at the other, and I somewhere between them. An awkward triangle of silence. Alexander ate methodically, his every motion deliberate. The only sounds were the faint scrape of silverware and the soft crackle from the fireplace. Mrs. Reed eventually broke the silence. Miss Tanya, have you lived in this area long? Born and raised, I said. My mother's still here. She's a teacher. Good, Mrs. Reed replied. Stability matters in this job. She hesitated, lowering her voice as she set down her fork. I'll be honest with you, Miss Tanya. Mr. Blackwood has driven 5 nurses to resignation. Not because he's cruel, but because he doesn't tolerate weakness. Alexander's eyes lifted slowly. You make me sound like a monster. Only a man who refuses help, Mrs. Reed said calmly. He looked away again, his jaw tightening. Maybe that's because I don't need it. I wanted to speak, to remind him that refusing help wasn't strength, but I bit my tongue. It wasn't my place. Not yet. When the meal ended, Mrs. Reed showed me to my room. It was simple but comfortable, overlooking the same stretch of lake. The ice outside caught the evening light like shattered glass. I unpacked quietly, my mind replaying every moment of that dinner. The tension, the brittle pride in his voice, the way he avoided looking at his reflection in the window. Beneath the arrogance, I had seen something else: exhaustion. As night settled over the estate, I stood by the window and whispered to myself, "He's not cruel. He's just broken." And somewhere downstairs in the darkened study by the lake, Alexander Blackwood stared out at the frozen horizon, thinking the very same thing, though neither of us would have admitted it. The estate was silent except for the wind whispering through the pine trees outside. It was well past midnight when I stirred in my bed, startled by a faint metallic clatter echoing down the hallway. For a moment, I thought it was just the heating system, but then came another sound, measured, rhythmic, strained, something heavy shifting, then the dull thud of metal against rubber. I slipped on my cardigan and stepped into the dimly lit corridor. The house at night felt different, colder, cavernous, the shadows stretching like they had a heartbeat of their own. I followed the sound through the long hallway that led to the lower floor, where faint light spilled from beneath the door at the end. Pushing it open, I froze. The private gym was vast, its walls lined with mirrors and chrome equipment that gleamed under recessed ceiling lights. And in the center of the room, gripping the rails of a set of parallel bars, was Alexander. He wasn't in his chair. Sweat darkened the fabric of his shirt, his arms trembling with the effort to keep himself upright. His breath came ragged, his teeth clenched, every muscle in his shoulders drawn tight. He managed one small, stubborn step before his right leg gave way. The wheelchair behind him stood empty, like a silent witness. My gasp broke the rhythm of the moment. Alexander whipped his head toward me, his eyes blazing. "What are you doing here?" "I heard something," I said quietly, still near the doorway. "I thought." "You thought what?" he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut. "That I had fallen. That I needed rescuing." He tried to straighten, gripping the rails again, but his hand slipped. The jolt sent a flash of pain through his expression. Instinctively, I took a step forward. "Let me." "Don't," he barked. "Don't you dare." The words hung in the air like frost. I stopped where I was, my heart pounding. He stared at me, his chest heaving, anger covering something far more fragile. "You shouldn't have come here," he said through his teeth. "You don't belong in this part of my life." I held my ground. "Then what part of your life does anyone belong to, Alexander? The part where you sit by the window and pretend you're not still fighting to stand." His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. He turned away, reaching for the chair. His hand shook slightly, betraying the exhaustion that pride refused to admit. Without a word, I walked to the far end of the bars, standing quietly until his eyes flicked up again. "You don't have to do this alone," I said softly. He let out a bitter laugh. "You think a nurse can fix this? I think a human being can try." Silence stretched between us, thick with defiance. I didn't move closer, didn't reach out, just waited. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he lowered himself into the chair, sweat glistening on his forehead. The defiance in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something weary and real. "You saw nothing tonight," he muttered. "Then let me be the one who helps you keep it that way," I replied. That made him pause. He studied my face, as if searching for pity and finding none. "Why?" he asked finally. "Because I've seen people give up," I said. "And I know what it looks like when someone hasn't." For a long moment, the only sound was his uneven breathing. Then,